We have more for your ears only. I'm Catherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. If the administration follows the law, there's no way they can continue the aid. That was Virginia's Republican Congressman Frank Wolf on human rights abuses by Egypt's military caretakers, even as demonstrators celebrated the first anniversary of President Hosni Mubarak's ouster. $1.3 billion in U.S. military aid to Egypt is now at risk as Congress debates the nation's democratic progress, or lack of it, including detention of foreign NGO workers, among them the son of U.S. Transportation Secretary Ray LaHood. Now this.
Good job tonight. Good job tonight. This nation is great because we get each other's backs. And if we hold fast to that truth in this moment of trial, there is no challenge too great, no mission too hard. As long as we are joined in common purpose, as long as we maintain our common resolve, our journey moves forward, and our future is hopeful, and the state of our union will always be strong.
It wasn't until the next day that most Americans learned why Barack Obama praised Defense Secretary Leon Panetta last week on his way to the podium for a re-election year State of the Union address. The Special Operations Commandos of Navy SEAL Team 6, killers of Osama bin Laden, had just completed the daring drop-in, chopper-out rescue of an ailing American aid worker and her Danish colleague kidnapped in Somalia.
Obama did not mention the operation in his speech, doubtless to avoid distracting from his own more political mission, but he did stress military accomplishments at the beginning and end, both the end of bin Laden and of the U.S. troop deployment in Iraq. And he touted the military mindset of helping one's buddies above all else as the essence of American success and hopefully his own approach to government.
National Journal chief correspondent Michael Hirsh says military dressing may season much of Obama's re-election effort, not because international affairs loom larger than U.S. economic hardship, but because they are an area of more clear Obama success and an indicator of leadership strength and reliability, on which Obama hopes to capitalize as contenders for the Republican nomination shred one another's credentials. And to talk more about that strategy and Obama's State of the Union, for your ears only, Michael Hirsh is on the line now. Welcome back to our program.
Happy to be back.
Beyond bin Laden, remind us of the military achievements Obama's strategists want voters to appreciate.
The bin Laden takedown was just one of at least 22 out of 30 senior al-Qaeda leaders that the Obama team claims to have taken down on his watch. And in fact, if you talk to a number of terror experts, you often hear the assessment that al-Qaeda is really not defeated, at least severely set back. So, he has that. I mean, this is the number one boogeyman from 9/11, Osama bin Laden, that he took down. He's also laying claim to some very wise strategic moves, a new toughness in dealing with Iran, a new geostrategic approach to reining in China's influence in Asia. And across the board, they're trying to convey a sense that this is a commander-in-chief you can trust. You
say President John F. Kennedy is the model they have in mind, in contrast with so many of his Democratic successors.
Yeah, it was interesting. That remark, the comparison to Kennedy, was made to me by Philip Zelikow, who was a senior counselor to Condoleezza Rice, George W. Bush's Secretary of State, and obviously someone aligned with the Republicans. So it was interesting to hear him and other Republican foreign policy professionals talk in such positive terms about Obama's record, in distinct contrast to what you're hearing on the GOP campaign trail. And the Kennedy comparison is particularly telling because it was really after Kennedy that Democratic presidents came to be particularly mistrusted on national security. The Vietnam War, decline of the Johnson administration, which oversaw the Vietnam War, really led to a lot of doubts about the Democrats and within the Democratic Party. And Jimmy Carter, the next Democratic president, was not much more highly thought of than LBJ was. Bill Clinton just had a so-so record. So it's interesting that you hear this assessment going back to Kennedy, who his accomplishments are perhaps they live on more in myth than actual fact, but nonetheless, he was credited with standing down Nikita Khrushchev during the Cuban Missile Crisis and being seen as a guy who was willing to use hard power, military power. And Obama is casting himself in that same light.
On the other hand, the strategy stresses an area of government operations, defense, that the president actually began scaling back last week with coming cuts in bases, force levels, pay and health benefits. Isn't that at least a political problem? And what's your reaction to the cutback plans?
Unquestionably, it's a vulnerability. But when Obama went to Asia, he promised that there would be no stinting on U.S. forces in that region, which is now part of this big new geopolitical focus. He announced an additional deployment of U.S. Marines to Australia for the first time. And this is being seen as a benefit of the withdrawal plans he's announced from Iraq and Afghanistan. Obviously, he has been criticized for that. But I think that part of the strategy is to remind voters of the last Republican president, George W. Bush, and the reckless use of power. And that's what you hear from Obama campaign officials, things like, in some ways, Mitt Romney, for example, they say, is even to the right of George W. Bush and taking a hard line. He refuses to negotiate with the Taliban in Afghanistan, of course, even at a time when many military experts and generals in the Pentagon say that there's no choice but to negotiate with the Taliban. So that's the message they're hoping to convey, one of responsibility and a moderate use of power.
Military references may have marked the beginning and end of Obama's State of the Union, but in between were more proposals for domestic government initiatives with or without congressional support and providing yet more targets for Republicans. What do you think were the most important of those proposals for fairness, for economic recovery, or just for Obama's campaign?
Well, I'm not sure which really was the most fair of those proposals, David.
But what in terms of the proposals themselves, do you think any of them are more than just political fodder at this point?
No, I really think that almost everything that Obama does and the White House does at this point is going to be about politics. Everything from its congressional strategy, which is one of essentially throwing plans out there on the economy that will be, turned back by the Republicans in the House, just by way of showing that he's trying. I mean, there's no question that he has shifted to a fiercely partisan approach. And I think you're going to see that continue. But I do think that with just a so-so case to make at best on economic recovery at a time when the latest numbers show the economy is not charging back, it's just barely coming back. The commander-in-chief strategy is going to become more and more important, and that's something of an irony for Obama, who you may remember. In the 2008 primaries, it was none other than Hillary Clinton who was raising questions about Obama's suitability to be commander-in-chief, and now they're putting it out there as one of his great strengths.
Michael Hirsh is the chief correspondent for the National Journal.
Quote from the news, patients were brought into us in the middle of interrogation for medical care in order to make them fit for further interrogation. That was Christopher Stokes, General Director of Doctors Without Borders, suspending some medical efforts in Libya and joining other aid and human rights organizations to complain about torture tactics by the new regime.
Next, the singular domestic achievement which the president barely mentioned, healthcare reform, for your ears only.